What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Res News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of Impact Wrestling. So let's start off talking about one departure from Impact Wrestling, that being former Knockouts Tag Team Champion Tenille Dashwood has indeed left the company and is now a free agent. Now, there was some speculation regarding Dashwood's future after she was removed from the Impact Wrestling roster page, but the former Knockout has confirmed her status with the company, confirming she is now indeed a free agent. As speculation begins to grow, she could be headed back to WWE now that, of course, Triple H is in charge of talent relations. He's the executive vice president of talent relations and also the head of WWE Creative. But Tenille Dashwood is indeed now a free agent after having been removed from Impact Wrestling's roster page recently. Dashwood took to social media on Sunday and implied she is no longer under contract with the company. She posted a tweet with the eyes emoji, and saying she posted the definition of a free agent, which is, quote, a person who does not have any commitments that restricts their actions, a sports player who is not bound by a contract, so is eligible to join any team. Basically saying, I am eligible to join any team. I do not have any commitments to any companies. I can go anywhere I please. Now, the 33-year-old has been with Impact Wrestling since August of 2019. Dashwood last performed for Impact Wrestling at their television tapings from Atlanta on July 2nd. She was defeated by Masha Slamovich in under 2 minutes. Dashwood and Madison Rayne won the Impact Knockouts Tag Team Championships in May, but then dropped them at Slammiversary to now former champions Rosemary and Taya Valkyrie. Of course, her tag team partner Madison Rayne has also since left Impact Wrestling. She is now a competitor / coach for All Elite Wrestling's Women's Division 2. Following Impact's television tapings in July, though, Dashwood toured with Australia with WSW. She took to Instagram to comment on what performing in her home country meant to her, saying, quotes, wrestling has been my life for as long as I can remember. There's nothing quite like the feeling I get when I come out on that stage. This past week was extra special for me, though, being able to tour my home country, Australia. I felt like everything had come full circle, and really, I just want to say thank you, Dashwood wrote. So it would look like, or certainly appear, that Tenille Dashwood is done with Impact Wrestling. Now, that doesn't mean you can't rule out a return for her in the future. She could come back. You know, this is pro wrestling after all. Anything is possible, especially with contracts the way they are in Impact Wrestling. You don't even have to be under contract to be appearing on the show. Several champions in Impact Wrestling right now don't have contracts with the company. So just because Tenille Dashwood is not under contract to Impact does not mean that we will never see her inside of an Impact Wrestling ring again. But as we have seen lots and lots of returns to WWE recently, we saw one last night with Johnny Gargano returning on Monday Night Raw. Of course, Johnny Gargano, who did recently appear on a broadcast of Impact Wrestling via video message. He wasn't as involved as Tenille Dashwood was with the company, but we've seen all of these returns recently for WWE, whether it's Karrion Kross and Scarlett, Hit Row, Dakota Kai, Dexter Lumis, and obviously Johnny Gargano, as I mentioned last night. Tenille Dashwood, people forget because there has been such a long stretch of time. She's been with Impact Wrestling for a really long time. As I mentioned, she's been with the company since 2019. We're talking 3 years at this point. But people do forget her run with WWE and, more importantly, her run with NXT as Emma, of course. And obviously, the character that Tenille Dashwood portrays now is far different from the Emma character from the NXT days. You know, the NXT days of her doing that dance and being a bit of a goofy character. But I believe it was William Regal recently said on his podcast, you know, people talk about the women's evolution in WWE or the women's revolution, whatever you want to call it. And they talk about, you know, the Charlotte Flairs and Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch and Bayley, the 4 horsewomen of WWE, and how pioneering they were in progressing women's wrestling in the company, and they were. You know, you can't take those accomplishments away from them, and therefore ginormous stars for WWE in terms of their women's division. And they really have spearheaded that movement and carried that torch for WWE for a really long time. But in reality, as William Regal says, you can talk about the women's evolution or revolution, whatever you want to call it. That started in NXT. And I agree with him, in my opinion, with 2 people. One being Paige and the other being Tenille Dashwood, Emma. Those early matches, go back and watch them. In the first days of Triple H's version of NXT, 2012, 2013, Paige versus Emma was the match. That was the match that was putting NXT women's wrestling on the map. Fantastic matches. They were matches where people were turning their heads and going, oh, actually, these girls, these females, these women, they can wrestle just as good as the guys, and they can have fantastic matches just like the guys. They can entertain by wrestling just like the guys. And again, for me, that women's revolution in WWE was absolutely had massive to do with Tenille Dashwood and Paige. So obviously, Paige is now no longer with the company. We know her status when it comes to her injury, so that's probably a situation there. But now that Triple H is back in the company and he's in charge of talent relations and creative, he's in a position to offer contracts. But whilst he's in those contract negotiations, he's also in the position to say, this is what creatively I see for you. And we have seen already one female name be brought back to the company that worked under Triple H and NXT. That's Dakota Kai. So it's not a stretch that Emma, Tenille Dashwood, whatever they want to call her when she returns, if she returns to the company, it's not a stretch that she could return. And obviously we know that her real life partner is Madcap Moss. So not that plays into it that much, in a big company like WWE, but those conversations could be had as well. So I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, if we saw Emma, Tenille Dashwood, return to WWE. But on the flip side of things, look, I wouldn't be shocked if she still appears in Impact Wrestling at some point. But I do feel that the general feeling I get is that she feels like she's had her run in Impact and now it's time to move on. It is a shame that she never became a Knockouts champion. I think with her quality and her ability in the ring, I think she's more than good enough to be the Knockouts champion, and only having a Knockouts Tag Team Championship reign to her CV is a bit underwhelming. Of course, she was gone from Impact Wrestling for a long period of time around the pandemic. You have to remember that as well. She was gone for a big chunk there. So it's not totally 3 years, but certainly it's going to be a big miss to Impact Wrestling and a huge pickup, whoever does indeed sign Tenille Dashwood. Let's move on, though, and let's talk about the Good Brothers. Yes, the Good Brothers, we know their contract situation. We just spoke about Tenille Dashwood leaving the company. We know, ultimately, the Good Brothers are set to leave Impact Wrestling, and we have the latest update when it comes to their contractual situation. We had heard previously several reports saying that their contracts were due to expire this summer. I believe, actually, they'd already expired. According to previous reports, they expired around the time of Slammiversary, but the expectation was, and the sort of verbal agreement, handshake agreement that they'd come to with Impact Wrestling and Executive Vice President Scott D'Amore, is that they were going to stick around until the end of the summer. They were booked up to the end of the summer with Impact Wrestling. There was an angle planned, there was something planned, and of course they're still the Impact Tag Team Champions as well. So there's lots of different aspects of how busy they are going to be with Impact Wrestling going forward, but we have a bit of an update when it comes to when they are actually going to be finished, even though they're not currently under contract to Impact Wrestling. And it's from Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful Select. He really has been all over this story, so he's provided some new details regarding their status, saying the Good Brothers' time with Impact Wrestling is reaching its possible conclusion. The Impact Tag Team Champions Doc Gallows and Kyle Anderson's original deals were 2-year contracts set to expire in late July. However, contrary to previous reports, the two aren't exactly free agents as of yet. It gets quite interesting here because it's slightly more complex than we had been previously made aware of. Fightful had reported in the past they'd committed to appearing through August, and we've been told that they actually agreed extensions. We've learned some more specifics on their agreements. The Good Brothers will remain with Impact through the August 26-27 tapings in Dallas, Texas. In addition to that, they'll be heading to New Japan Pro Wrestling for a couple of weeks in September, but will be contractually free agents by then. We'd heard in the past they'd agreed to do some work with New Japan Pro Wrestling through the 2023 Wrestle Kingdom shows, and they'll have more updates after next week's show. So it's interesting here because, again, the previous reports, and this is what is always fascinating, I guess, about pro wrestling journalism, even with super reputable outlets like Fightful Select and Sean Ross Sapp, who to me at this point is the undisputed leader when it comes to reliability and reporting in the pro wrestling journalism space. I think his track record really does speak for itself. But what we had heard previously is what I just said a couple of minutes ago, that their contracts had expired, but they'd essentially verbally agreed, or on a handshake agreement, they'd agreed that they were going to stick around until the end of the summer. But now the latest details are actually Impact maybe wanted a little bit more than that. They're more just a verbal commitment, and they'd actually signed contract extensions, like they'd put pen to paper for a few weeks or at least a month or so, or a couple of months, looking like possibly like a 2-month contract extension if you're looking at their deals expired in July, and we're talking August and September maybe, or maybe 1 month, 6 weeks, something like that. They've signed a very short-term contract extension with the company, and they will remain with Impact through the late August tapings in Dallas, Texas. And after that, they're most likely going to be free agents at that point because they're working for New Japan Pro Wrestling in September. So sometimes with these reports, you also have to read between the lines because, well, they are going to report certain things. Certain things they're probably, from their sources, they say, well, don't say when they're going to drop the Impact World Championship. Don't say what angle is going to happen. Don't say this, don't say that, because, again, you don't want to ruin your sources as well. So I think, reading between the lines here, their possible last dates with Impact Wrestling are those August 26 and 27 tapings in Dallas. We know that there is going to be an Impact World Tag Team Championship match of Matt Taven, and Mike Bennett. And it looks like, to me, it would make a lot of sense that they would take the Impact World Tag Team Championships from the Good Brothers, and there will be some way of writing the Good Brothers off of television at those TV tapings, I think. We have seen recently the Honor No More versus Bullet Club feud, so maybe this will be an extension of that, and that's how they write the Good Brothers off of television. And then from September onwards to possibly January, it's looking like the Good Brothers are going to be focusing all of their attention on New Japan Pro Wrestling and going back, more importantly, over to Japan to do those television dates and do those shows. And I'm sure they'll have a big match planned for Wrestle Kingdom as well. We know that, of course, Kyle Anderson recently won the Never Openweight Championship too, so they're factored in massively when it comes to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And as I mentioned, it shouldn't be much of a surprise that they are factored in, because when they signed initially with Impact Wrestling in 2020, they had clauses put in their contracts that, yes, Impact, you have priority over our dates, but you know, when a New Japan event comes up, we want to work it. And they were allowed that at the time. The issue was, this was July 2020, and traveling to Japan was just a no-go. And it really hasn't been an option until very recently. And even so, it's still in Japan, is that the crowds aren't allowed to cheer. The restrictions are still in place in certain aspects of Japan. So as things start to get back to normal in that front, I think they're going to try, certainly, to make up for some lost time, I feel like. And that's by doing a lot of dates in Japan. I don't honestly expect really to see any dates of All Elite Wrestling. I guess it's possible, but I just don't see that at this point, to be honest with you. But we'll have to wait and see when it comes to that. But that's the latest when it comes to the Good Brothers. Impact Wrestling on AXS TV last week. There's a couple of different stories I want to talk about here. I want to talk about the ratings, but then I also talk about a former Impact Wrestling name has spoken about being on AXS TV, and it's really fascinating. So let's talk about the ratings, because they weren't good last Thursday. Now, I know what you say, oh, and you only talk about the ratings when Impact Wrestling ratings are bad, which is not true. I do talk about the ratings. I just talk about the ratings in general, and I know Impact Wrestling is different to most promotions, i.e., you can't live and die by the ratings. And to be honest, you shouldn't live and die by the ratings in 2022 anyway. You know, money is made by television contracts, not ratings. The ratings do determine the contracts eventually, but they're made by television contracts. They're made via the money's made via merchandising. The money's made via live events. The money's made via subscriptions to an online service like Impact Plus or Ultimate Insiders for Impact Wrestling. So I understand there's many different avenues in which people watch Impact Wrestling. So before you say that is the case. But the numbers are in for Thursday's Impact Wrestling last week. Showbuzz Daily reports that Impact Wrestling on August 18 drew 92,000 viewers. Now, this number is significantly down from the 131,000 viewers the show drew the prior Thursday. This is the lowest rating for the show that it has drawn since July 29. But it wasn't just the viewership that declined, it was also the demo rating that declined, drawing a 0.02 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. This is down from the 0.03 rating the show has charted in the past 3 consecutive weeks. The show did not chart among the cable top 150 originals on Thursday as well. Now, Impact Wrestling's pre-show before the Impact drew 29,000 viewers on the promotion's YouTube channel. Obviously, you can keep up with how many viewers it has now at the time too as well. But as I keep saying, when it comes to Impact Wrestling and the viewership and the ratings for AXS TV, that is what they are always going to be. I don't think they're ever going to get back to, I mean, forget the Spike days. Just forget that. Because it's just not even worth comparing at this point. And frankly, the numbers that TNA Wrestling did on Spike, WWE would be very, very happy with those numbers today. They were getting 2.5 million viewers, you know, and SmackDown, if SmackDown does that, it seemed as monumental at this point. So let's not even talk about Spike numbers, but what you can look at for comparison is during the days of the pandemic, where there was no crowds in attendance at the TV tapings and you had the AEW crossover, which you could argue short term it was good for ratings, but long term was it good for Impact Wrestling? Probably not. During that period of time, Impact was doing good numbers on AXS TV. You know, we're talking 170, 180, over 200,000 viewers. They were doing record numbers for Impact on AXS TV. Is that because there were no spoilers out there? Is that because there was the AEW crossover? I think of all of the above. I think in my opinion, the biggest thing was a lack of spoilers, honestly, out there. I don't see Impact ever getting back to that at this point. I don't. And again, that's no slight to the quality of Impact or anything like that. I think the spoilers are a massive part of it, because out of those 160, 170, 180,000 viewers that were tuning in during the pandemic, they're all hardcore fans, you know, because AXS TV, not many people have it, and then if you do, you have to go out of your way to watch Impact Wrestling, put it that way. And I think the spoilers really do hurt that. But I also think just being on AXS TV hurts that. You know, if they were on a cable network with more exposure, they would get better numbers. It's just it's factual at this point. So that's the latest when it comes to the ratings. But Brian Hebner, former Impact Wrestling referee, has kind of confirmed my theory on this. And I don't bring this up as point scoring. See, I was right. But we as a community here on this channel have spoken so much about Impact Wrestling having to move off of AXS TV to really develop their exposure and perform to a bigger audience. We've spoken about this so much. And I know it's not easy because, of course, Impact Wrestling and AXS TV are owned by the same owners, that being Anthem, so it's easy and it's safe for Impact to air on AXS TV, but the exposure is what it is. And during the latest episode of Reffing Up with Brian Hebner, Hebner discussed the future of Impact Wrestling, and the referee thinks Impact needs to be on a bigger television network than AXS TV to grow. He said, quote, "To me, it's about numbers. Numbers don't lie. And until they figure a way to get on a bigger network, and I understand that on the network of AXS TV, which is actually the owner of Impact Wrestling, the last I heard when I was leaving or retiring, however you want to put it, I know that there was some shopping of networks going on at that point in time, and there still probably is as we speak. But I do think if there's a bigger network, and they can be bigger as far as numbers weekly, I think there would be a conversation that you're asking about, because the fact is this: if AEW is as close to WWE as Impact could be as close to AEW in that same form, I think we're talking totally differently at this point right now, and this conversation is not even brought up. I think they do a hell of a job on AXS TV, and I think they do pretty decent numbers for the size of that network. So to me, it's about the numbers, man. It's not about the quality of work. That's for effing sure. And you know what? I think he's absolutely spot on. I really do. I think basically what he's saying is the quality is there. It's a good program. It's a good product. And if it was just on a bigger network, it would get better numbers. Now, I'm not saying that Impact Wrestling is going to go on ABC or NBC or something ridiculous like that, or CBS, because it's not. But there has to be cable networks out there with more exposure. And I think the encouraging thing is like he said that when he was leaving, retiring, which was July, so we're talking just like 6 weeks ago, there is or was active shopping around to try and find a better network, because they realize that what we've got here is good. We've got good talent, we've got a good product, and with a little bit more of a budget and with a bigger television network, we could do good numbers. We're not going to say WWE numbers or even AEW numbers, but they could get up to maybe 400,000. Why not 500,000? And then who knows what can happen with that. So for their, obviously, clearly they're safe when it comes to, they're not going to go anywhere in Impact Wrestling. Anthem again has AXS TV, but I think for the latest development for Impact Wrestling, they clearly need to find a bigger network to be on. Certainly, in my opinion, anyway. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's Impact Wrestling news stories in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.